After a summer of historic drought, wet fall weather feels like a relief. But is it a game changer for farmers? Too little, too late? And what if drought becomes a new feature of farming in Vermont? We're digging into it today on Across the Fence. Hello, Vermont. Ag is inherently chaotic, but when you add weirding weather to the equation, the situation facing farmers gets even more stressful. So, how are Vermont farmers doing right now, and what comes next? Those are some of the questions I have for my guest today. Heather Darby is an agronomic and soils specialist with UVM Extension, and Shawn Lucas is an agronomist and certified crop advisor with UVM Extension. Heather and Shawn, welcome. Very nice to have you here. Heather, I know this is, an upteenth visit of yours to Across the Fence, but Shawn, you're newer to the extension community, so happy to welcome you onto the show. Good to have you all here. I figure when you have two agronomists sitting here, one of the things that you start with is the science. So what is going on when we have these types of drought conditions? How does it impact soil?
Okay. Well, you want to go first, or you want me to go?
Well, I'll say that going back to last fall, farmers were happy about the fact that it was dry. They were able to get the cover crops in, fields were easy to manage, harvest went pretty smoothly, I'd say. Things kind of stayed dry though, and we moved into 2025. January was still dry, February, March kind of average, April dry, and then wham, May comes along, and we got almost twice as much rain as you would expect.
Yeah, we got dumped.
And so that's when farmers are trying to do the important things of prepping fields, terminating cover crops, maybe spreading some manure, and then by late May you're trying to get your crops in, and the conditions were just not conducive to being in the field in heavy equipment. They don't want to damage their soils, and that's tough on the equipment, so it was real hard. It set the season back.
Soil, yeah, it was pretty, I don't want to say beat up, but it had been under a lot of stress.
Yeah, because
already.
we'd also come out of 23 and 24 with flooding.
So the stress of being wet all the time, so soils, will lose oxygen when there's a lot of water in them, and we need oxygen in our soils just like we need oxygen because the soils are alive. They're breathing living organisms, and when we get a lot of rainfall, oftentimes that can limit the biological activity of the soil. And as Shawn had mentioned, when you're going on those soils, often when they're wet, you don't really have a lot of choice sometimes. You got to get the work done. You do more damage because you can flatten the soils and squish the soils a lot easier when it's really wet. So then, here comes dry weather. After, we've had that really wet weather, the soils are stressed. They're sort of, we call it compaction in the biz. But, they're suffering a bit. It makes it hard for the plants to grow too. And when it dries out like that, going from one extreme to the other, it's tough on the soils. The health of the soils is really compromised by that.
And when we talked a little bit ahead of time, and you had mentioned that this was also really uneven. That some folks were able to, dependent upon the timing, some people were getting crops in and were like, this is great. Everything was timed out perfectly, but it wasn't consistent. All over the state, different outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can relate to their neighbor getting 3 inches of rain, and they didn't even get a drop, and they're next door almost.
Just because it's dumping doesn't mean it's dumping on you.
My family was having a barbecue, and I was out in the barn one day, and I couldn't get to the house to eat because it was raining so hard. And when I got to the house, it hadn't rained, and literally just, a few hundred feet away. So it is highly variable what people are experiencing. And, we're looking often for tiny windows of time in farming to get out there and hit the ground running. And so some people got that little window this spring and were able to get their crops in, and other farms didn't get that tiny window and really kind of got pushed to the edge of when they could be doing their field work. So.
Which means then we get into the growing season. And what does that do? What does that do? What happens to hay? What happens to corn,
Well, if you want to think about corn, people weren't getting that in until June. At least in the Champlain Valley, where we've got some heavier, wetter, clayey soils. There were a lot of folks that weren't until mid-June. Most of your corn growth takes place June, July, August. Well, we didn't get in until mid-June, and then the water faucet shuts off. And so it really impacted the development of the corn crop. And some of the farmers that I'm working with in Champlain Valley were saying anywhere from 50 to 65% of normal expected yields is what they got.
Oh gosh.
So
okay.
So it was pretty impactful.
Yeah, well then, so that sets the stage. So now we're talking about livestock farmers and what they're going through after this uneven crop season. You know, corn is depleted, hay is not dependable. So what's it looking like for them now? What's going on with their growing season? What's happening?
Yeah, I think for farmers that are harvesting hay, you know, it was really tough because our hay fields like cool, wet weather. They're perennial, cool season grasses, you know, legumes. So when it gets hot,
Things that you would think would be dependable in Vermont.
right? And so exactly when it gets hot and it gets dry, those crops, even though they're perennials, they just shut down. And so our farms also weren't able, whether they were grazing livestock or trying to make hay, they weren't able to get those like last cuttings that we would get in Vermont that everybody depends on, you know? So for some people, they didn't get their third or their fourth harvest of hay. People had to pull their animals off from pasture because there was nothing to eat. And that just dips in further to feed reserves, right? Because we can't graze in the middle of the winter, obviously. In Vermont, we can't harvest hay in the middle of the winter in Vermont. So we depend on stored feed to feed animals. And so what's happened now is those feed storages, reserves are very, very low. On some farms completely depleted, and people are having to look elsewhere, you know, to purchase feed.
Right, and it's all over the state. Because I think that
in the region,
it's all, exactly all over the region. So the kind of cooperative networks that farmers had been able to lean into, also everyone has kind of been hit at the same level instead of it saying it's all right because I can go down south, I can et cetera. So what's going on? How are they dealing with that situation?
Well, it is regional, so it's not like you could just call up the folks across the lake and get hay shipped over here. And truthfully, east of the Mississippi in general, a lot of the area experienced drought this year. So a lot of the areas where you may look to purchase feed from.
The catastrophe, the zone of catastrophe is wide.
Even if you can find it, the farther away you have to go, the more expensive it is to get that feed here. So it really puts people in a bind financially.
Yeah, you were going to say?
Yeah, no, just the distance to haul. A lot of the feeds we feed on livestock operations are fermented feeds. That's how they store over the winter, and those are things you can't really transport that far and then restore. And then also the quality of the feed. You know, trying to find the right quality you need for your farm to make milk or meat or whatever you're producing. It, you know, gets more difficult and there's more competition.
More competition, right? Yeah, and on top of that, so drought also literally means less water. So you're not just having to look for feed, you're also now looking for water. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of farms are hauling water to their livestock daily. That's a real challenge for people. And, you know, we all think water's plentiful here, but even, you know, in some places in Vermont, it's hard to sometimes find water, dig wells, have really strong water sources.
And all of this then is hitting the bottom line. Right, which is the big stress.
The rule of thumb is that 50 gallons a day is what a cow needs to make a good milk supply. 50 gallons of water. So yeah, people's wells were drying out, and the cows still need water. One farmer in Addison County was moving 5,000 gallons of water per day to meet the needs of his milking herd.
So more time, more labor,
fuel.
More stress, more fuel.
And then more money.
Yeah, more money.
So on that note, what kind of resources are available what's being done to help farmers? I know the problem is of course the aid doesn't get there exactly when you need it, but there are some things that are about, like the drought survey. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the Vermont Agency of Agriculture has put out a survey, and you might think, how does a survey help? How does a survey help farmers, but really the goal of the survey is to understand what the impact is. And it's important to know what the impact is, so then resources can be diverted, resources can be found. In the case of declaring like a federal disaster, you have to have that kind of data to be able to justify that you're having, some type of natural disaster.
And folks are out, like Senator Welch was just down in Addison County, right?
He was, and he was on sort of a fact-finding mission, listening to statements from farmers and hearing about their experience. He was at 2 farms in the county. He's trying to get information and figure out if we can get some federal aid. It's a little tricky right now because
we're in a government shutdown on top of everything else. I know. It never rains, it pours, which actually fails not entirely. And it is pouring right now. In the studio, we can actually hear rain drumming down outside. All right. Well, final thoughts. I mean, where do we stand? What do you think comes next? What are some things that farmers can do to kind of work for the future?
Yeah, I mean, we have all been in conversations around building resiliency. It's hard when you get hit constantly with these kind of weather extremes. But, our goal at the University of Vermont Extension is to help farmers adapt and work on aspects of the operation where they can become more resilient. And we talked about soils right from the get-go and helping people implement practices that are going to help make those soils a sponge when it's raining too much, and then also a sponge to hold more water when it's droughty. Those are, at least as agronomists, soil specialists, those are things we're really working with farmers on.
And more
irrigation,
irrigation, for the maybe, or irrigation systems, something folks are looking at now?
Yes.
You still need
like
water
my
to
home
irrigate.
state.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
You need water to irrigate.
Good water sources, but that is a practice that's been emerging as we experience these longer dry periods in places where we don't normally see irrigation, like out on pastures, places like that.
Well, I want to be sure that we show the link even one more time for that drought impact survey, because the survey deadline is coming up on December 15th, and there are resources like an updated water hauler list and the Vermont Feed Finder Marketplace on the Agency of Ag website. Hoping that's helpful. Heather and Shawn, thank you for joining me. Hope the rain keeps coming. Hope it makes a difference. And as always, Vermont, thank you for learning and exploring with me today. And thanks to the team that makes Across the Fence possible. I'm Amy Finley. This is Across the Fence. Come back and let's learn and explore again tomorrow.